Hello, and welcome to Sarah's Baked Goods. Today we're going to be doing cages. This is going to be a two-part series. Today we're going to be doing pears, blueberries, and raspberries. Tomorrow we'll be doing apples, apricots, and strawberries. Those three we're going to change up a little bit, but let's get started on the new cages. We're going to start with our raspberry and blueberry. We're going to make a compote for both of them, put that on our cages, and then top them with fresh berries. What that's going to do is get the nice concentrated flavor of the raspberry and blueberries on the bottom, while still having the texture and lightness of fresh berries on top. Also, it's going to get you that height. Because the compote isn't a jelly, it's not going to hold its shape. It's going to be nice and flat, where the blueberries and raspberries will hold itself up a bit, so when the puff pastry puffs up, it's going to be a wall perfectly and then level with your berries. The way we're going to make our compote is with frozen berries, so we get, again, that concentrated flavor. We're going to put half the blueberries in here and half the raspberries. And then the other halves are on the side. The reason why we're doing this is when we start cooking this, it's gonna break down and become very smooth. There's not gonna be any berries surviving. When we add this at the end, that gives us more of a texture as well. That way we have a smooth texture, a slightly lumpy texture, and fresh berry texture. It very complements each other when you have all of them together. But to get started, I'm only doing about 3 cages, that's why I'm using small pots and not a lot of berries. To get started, we're just going to put our water, our sugar, and our lemon juice with those beginning blueberries. Now, depending on taste, I've tasted the blueberries and raspberries. I'm going to go with about 25 for the blueberries and 30 for the sugar, or for the raspberries. Make sure you taste test. If they're too sweet, use less sugar. If they're not too sweet, use more sugar. Put this off to the side now. Do the same for this. Add our water, our lemon juice, and our sugar. Now we're just going to put these off to the side, start cooking them out. When they're fully cooked, we'll add in our other berries, stir them around until they're warm, then set the compotes off to the side to cool down, and then we'll start on our pear. The pear is going to have a caramel on the bottom, so we'll start our caramel and have that cool down as well, so that we can put it on the bottom nicely, and then put our pears on top. We're going to be using a wet caramel for the pears. Also, we're gonna maybe add them to the apple cages. We'll see if that changes them and makes them even better. So we're gonna make more than we need, because I'm gonna be making some for the pears and for the apple cages. The way we're gonna make this wet caramel is by putting sugar and water in here, cooking it until it's a nice dark caramel color, take it off the heat, and add in our cream. We can add our vanilla into our cream right away, so that it's nice and ready to go before we start panicking. We're going to be using a whisk to make sure that it's mixed in nicely, so we can just set that off to the side. Next, we're just going to put our sugar, then we're going to pour our water in, and then put that off with our compotes. Spread your sugar across the bottom so that there's no giant clumps or the water won't touch it. And that will make it harder for it to caramelize. When I figure out how much caramel I need, I will change that into the recipe and make sure that you're not making too much. I'm probably making slightly too much for this amount of apple and pear cages. Then you want to add your water across the whole top. And then you just want to swirl it very slightly Don't go too crazy so that it smooths it out. Now we're just going to put this off to the side with our compotes. Once it gets to a nice caramel color, we'll take it off the heat, put the cream in. For the caramel, you don't want to stir it at all, or you'll start to form crystals along the sides. If you do start to see crystals along the sides, grab a brush with a little bit of water and just brush them away. They're not a big deal, just try not to whisk too much or you'll just have giant crystal sugars everywhere. The raspberry compote's coming out good, and so is the blueberry. Once these reduce a bit, I'll add in the other berries and then set it off to the side. Here's a better look at them. You can see that the raspberry is reducing nicely. That'll be done very shortly. And then just turn up the blueberry just slightly. I have the caramel on low just because I'm playing with these ones. If you know you can handle going fast with all of them, you can turn these all the way up. It just creates more risk. There's nothing wrong with cooking these super quickly, other than you might burn them. So as long as you can handle it, go right ahead and do what you can handle. In the bakery, normally what I would have being done is large batches, like big giant pots, and then storing them in the fridge, and then taking them out when I need it. So I'd make a batch good enough for 5 days or 4 days, because compote has sugar which allows it to last a lot longer than just the regular berries. And I would only want to go up to 5 days so that it's as fresh as possible and I don't have to worry about giving an inferior product to my customers. So just keep stirring them a little bit here and there, making sure that no bottoms are burning. This will take a little while, so we'll come back when they're ready to go. You can start to see that the blueberries are thickening up. That's perfect. The raspberries are real close as well. So when you start to see it thickening up like this, that's when you're going to add in your frozen berries. So let me just grab those and scoop those in. We're gonna keep this bowl so that we can store the compote in there. Oh, careful. Then we're just going to heat up these frozen berries so that they aren't frozen. They need to cook just a bit, not as much as everything else. Over here, the raspberries, really close. I'll be putting in those soon as well. Once you see this start to bubble again, that's when you know to take off the blueberries. We'll let them cool, thicken up a bit more, and then they'll be perfect for putting them in the cages. Over here, the raspberries looking good now. We'll add in our raspberries as well. So once this heats up, starts boiling again, we'll take it off and let it cool down. And you can see now, in the raspberry it's a lot easier to see. There's very smooth liquid right here, and then there's the giant chunks here and there. And that's what you want. That will give you complementary textures, which is what you're looking for. So once this heats up, and the blueberries are now boiling as well, I'll take them off the heat, pour them back into our bowl, then we'll put them in our cages when they're ready. Here's what they look like. Looking good. They're very liquidy right now because they're hot, but as soon as they cool down, they'll be the perfect thickness. This is bubbling now too, so these are done, and we'll focus purely on our caramel. And here's how the raspberries look. You can see all the sugar is now melted away. Now we're just going to wait till it caramelizes more. I've turned up the heat because now all I have to worry about is this. I have my cream ready in my station so that when this is caramel, I can take it over here, whisk in the cream, and we'll be done. This takes a while, so this is a perfect time to clean up any dishes that you've made with your pots for the blueberries and raspberries. You can get your egg wash going, so you're good to go for that. I don't recommend getting your puff pastry rolled out yet, because if you are all of a sudden ready on the caramel, you have to rush and you might burn yourself. This stuff is very sticky and is very dangerous. The sugar will stick to your skin, and when you rub it off, it will take the skin with it. So you have to be very careful when working with this. If you start to notice it's splashing up, you can use a wet brush and just brush it away, and that will brush it back in. So you just make sure it's nice and wet. Brush, and all those crystals go away. And then you can go back to normal. Once you get to this stage, it's very close to being done. It's getting darker and darker, and it gets to the caramel color very quickly as soon as you start to see some brown. So as soon as you see brown, pay very close attention to it and get ready. You don't want to go too quick or it's going to be flavorless, but if you go too late, which changes very quickly, it will be burnt. So you gotta get that timing right. Once it gets the color of syrup, you're good to go. Take it off the heat. I don't want to put it on there. I'm just gonna put it up here for now. And add in a little bit of our milk and stir it. It's going to bubble up. Be very careful of that. You're just tempering it. That's just how it goes. If you go all your cream at once, you're gonna seize it, and then it's gonna have huge problems. So once it's tempered, you can take it off the heat over here, and then add the rest of your cream, sorry. Just bring that in. Unfortunately, I waited slightly too long, and the taste is burnt. So I'm gonna have to start a new batch, and we'll try again. On to attempt number 2. Hopefully this one goes better, and I get just before that stage. That's why you need to be very careful, because to get that good flavor, you do need to go near the edge. But if you wait a few seconds, it's over. But remember, taste it. Don't just assume it's good, because if you tasted that and went, ooh, that's good, or sorry, you didn't taste it and you just assumed it was good, your customers aren't ever going to come back. You're going to need to make sure you make that call and go, let's get rid of it. I'm going to go in a slightly smaller saucepan so it goes a bit quicker. Other than that, nothing's changed since the last time I tried. I will be putting it in this bottle afterwards. Make sure when you use a bottle like this that this is a lot colder than you would normally put it into a bowl or something. When you put the cream in, it's going to cool down, but not enough for you to be able to put it in this plastic bottle. So let it just cool down a bit longer in your pot off to the side, and then after about 5 minutes pour it into your squeeze bottle. That way you can do nice drizzle, you can fill something. These are very nice to be using for anything like that. But we'll come back when I'm mixing in the cream again. We're getting to that stage now. It's getting darker. We're going to be careful this time. Make sure that gets to the right stage and we don't go too late. Yeah, we're good. Get down bubbles. Pour in a slight bit so that it tempers. and then just slowly pour in while mixing. We're going to let this cool off to the side and then put it into our bottle. But before we do that, we'll do a little taste test. It's tasting good, so we'll leave this off to the side. It's cooled down now. It's still hot, but it's cold enough to be able to be put into these containers. I'm just going to get rid of my spoon. So we're just going to pour. And obviously we're going to scrape everything down to make sure we get as much as possible. Don't want any waste. Also, we don't want to wreck our sinks or any plumbing. This caramel should be perfect for fillings and drizzles. It just needs to cool down. Let it cool down without the lids on. That way any steam can come out and it will get thicker that way. And we'll come back when everything's fully cooled and start on our puff dough. Now we just need to roll out our dough. These three are very special puff pastry cages because they don't have a top. So I guess technically they're not really cages, but they're very similar to the cages, so I'm gonna call them cages. Instead of rolling this out into 16 pieces and then having 8 bottoms and 8 tops, we're going to roll this out into 9 pieces, 9 big squares, cut it in a very specific way that allows us to build up some walls, that allows us to put our compote or caramel in without leaking out. And because we're not using tops, I want to just make it extra big to compensate so that all the cages are about the same size, even if one doesn't have a top. That doesn't mean that these use the same amount of puff dough. It is slightly less, but they will still cost about the same because there's more steps for this one, meaning all the costs will be in your labor instead of the dough itself. Now that we're at this stage, we're going to cut this into 9 pieces. One thing you really want with this dough is it to be as square as possible, or you're not going to get nice pieces. If you get rectangle pieces when you cut, the dough is going to not fold properly, and you'll see why in a second. Just cut it 3 by 3. The reason why I'm cutting it so early is because it's not rolling out nicely, meaning the gluten's really tough at the moment, and I want to let it rest for 2 seconds while I'm cutting, and that will make it a lot easier to roll out for the final pieces. We're going to go with 6 pieces of dough first with the blueberry and raspberry. The caramel isn't fully cooled yet, so we're going to put these 3 pieces back into the fridge and let them rest while the other ones bake. Now let's roll these other 6 pieces out to their correct shape. You want a square, remember, so get your dough as nicely in a square as possible. And don't just roll it out one way, switch ways so that you get the nice square. If you notice that it's not coming out in a square, you can pull it until it does. Doesn't have to be a perfect square, it just needs to be in a square shape so that you can cut it nicely. And that's what you're going for. Nice square shape. And we're going to cut this in a specific way that allows it to have walls. So the way we're going to cut it is we're going to cut it like this. One whole way. One whole way. Just like that. And then do the same thing on the other side, making sure you don't connect them. Can't connect them or this won't work. And then you're going to move your puff pastry, fold it in. Just like that. That way you build up a wall, you can put your compote in there, and when this bakes up, your berries will be at the right height as well. I'm just gonna leave this off to the side, do the rest, then we'll bake the two types, blueberry and raspberry. I'll quickly roll all these out, quickly cut them, and move on from there. Let's start by bringing everything over here. We're gonna egg wash just to glue the sides on. Just like that. Put it off to the side. Now we're going to scoop our compotes on. Get enough that it fills it. We're going to be doing 3 of each. I will be making sure that I get the recipe fully complete for when you look in the description. So you won't be doing the exact recipe I'm doing because I'm doing it for 3 and I'm going to make the recipe for 12. But if you want to do exactly what I'm doing, just divide the recipe by 4 and you'll get exactly what I'm getting. Now for the raspberry. And before we put them in, we got to put on our fresh berries. Now the last thing is to just egg wash. Next time I'm gonna egg wash first. That way I don't spread all these juices everywhere and make it look ugly. But let's see how they turn out. Look out these now. They're looking really good. The only issue being that spreading the sauce everywhere caused it to spill and burn a little bit. But the ones that didn't spread too much look really nice. Especially with this raspberry one over here. They're looking really good. Hopefully they're tasting good. And you see what I mean? As the walls rised up, the berries themselves are at the right height to make them look extra good. So these ones looking great. Now let these cool and start working on to our pear cage. Now let's roll out our puff dough. And do the same thing for the pears. The only difference is we have to cut up our pears to be nice thin pieces that we can stack nicely. So for the pear, we're going to cut it in half. Scrape out the insides that we don't want. Then we're going to just make nice thin cuts like this. We're going to cut these just like we did the other ones. Then we're going to egg wash the bottom, create our square, just like so. This time I'm going to egg wash now before so that it looks nicer. With our caramel, there we go. With our caramel, we're just gonna fill the inside. For the small pieces like this, you're gonna need 2. Line them up like that. And then bigger pieces, you can just put it on like that. The one thing you need to remember is there's a small side and a big side, so switch as you're going. To get the right direction, because you do want this slanted, you want to see the skin. You have one side and the other side. The other side will be slanted the other way. And this side will be slanted this way. I'm going to change this up just slightly on the fly. Because I realize I need a specific shape, which is about that much off. Then we can just continue on till we're full, just like that. And that's how we're going to make the pear cages. Use this to help lift it. I should have put this on the tray to begin with, which is what I would normally do. I was just trying to show it easier for you guys. So this one might be messed up, but we're gonna see what I can do. If I can do some magic. There we are. Just fix the pears. Perfect. Let's finish this up by cutting all of these. Here's a better angle for you guys. Egg wash. Form your square. Fill with caramel. It's a lot easier with a full bottle. Sadly, I forgot again to egg wash the second time before putting stuff in, but this one isn't so bad, so maybe I can still have it look nice. There we are, and we'll get this in the oven, see how it turns out. The caramel leaked out quite a bit on these ones. What I'm going to do to change that is just put a bit less caramel, and I'm also going to drizzle caramel on top just to make sure I get that caramel taste. But it didn't affect the look of them. Just there at the bottom, maybe I can scrape that off a bit. So they're looking good and they hopefully taste good. Here's how they turned out, looking good. A few issues throughout the day with the caramel. Make sure you get that perfect timing. If you go too late, you'll burn it like I did. But if you do, just restart, try again. Had a bit of leakage from the pears. Gonna fix that by putting a bit less and then drizzling to make sure that caramel taste comes out. With the berry ones, make sure to egg wash first so that you don't get these black spots, because that's just the berry juices. Other than that, they're all looking really good. We'll see how they taste, but this is how part 1 is done. Tomorrow we'll be doing apple, strawberry, and apricot cages. All of those cages have tops, so they will be a little bit different than the same one. The apple cages will stay the same shape I've always made them, but the apricot and strawberry one, I'm going to cut a different design on the top. Here's how they turned out. Blueberries were tasting amazing, and the raspberries were a bit too sour, so I'm going to be changing the sugar a bit. So there's going to be some extra sugar for the raspberry. Now, the only problem with the pear was the leakage, but I'm going to make sure to glue them a lot better, put less caramel and colder caramel to make sure it doesn't leak in the future. If you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I even have my own website. Thank you, and have a nice day.